Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, members of the Hub Committee, council members, officers, and anyone who is joining us online for this afternoon's meeting of the West Devon Hub Committee. We'll move straight on. Apologies for absence. I've had one apology from Councillor Pearce. I don't know if you've had any others, Mr. White.
I've had the same apology, thank you, Leader, and technology willing, Councillor Pearce is on my laptop via Teams, so you'll be listening
Excellent.
in, and if he wishes to make a point, I'll endeavour to do so through Teams.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any personal or disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interests they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. Are there any interests to declare? I've got nothing coming forward, Mr. White. Obviously, if anything occurs at any point in the meeting, I'm relying on members to declare an interest as appropriate. Item 3, items requiring urgent attention. I have nothing, Mr. White.
Me neither, thank you, Leader.
Item 4, confirmation of minutes. The minutes have been circulated. If we can go through them page by page for accuracy and completeness. Anything on page 1, members? Page 2. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. In which case, if it's the wish of the meeting, I'm happy to accept those as a true record of the meeting. If you could note that, Mr. White.
Thank you, Leader.
Item 5, public questions. I've not been advised of any questions.
That's correct, thank you, Leader.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 6, the Hub Committee forward plan. If members could address the forward plan and just let us know if there are any items there that are worthy of comment, any inaccuracies, anything that needs to be brought forward onto the plan. Any comments, members? Councillor Cheadle.
Yeah, I've raised this point before. I would have thought the Hub Committee forward plan would include updates on the plan for West Devon, or at least the delivery plan. I think it was suggested that it should. It doesn't yet.
Mr. Bates.
Thank you, Leader. You're quite correct, Councillor Cheadle. We absolutely do intend to bring back a quarterly and comprehensive report update on the plan for West Devon. We will be putting that into the forward plan in its next iteration, so that's very much the intention, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make sure that happens. Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. Any other comments, observations, members? In which case, I'm happy to take that item as noted, Mr. White.
Thank you, Leader.
Item 7 is the Planning Service Improvement Plan. If I can call on Councillor Mott to introduce this item. Councillor Mott.
Thank you, Chair. Members will have seen the report and noted what's in there. We have now, with our new enforcement team, been able to make improvements within the service provided, and now that they are beginning to find their feet and find their way around the borough, they are working hard and they are now actually managing to close more cases than we are getting in. So the plan is to hopefully see more improvements going forward. Other than that, as you can see, it is just really an update on the service where we are at the moment. And if you have any questions, please.
Any questions, members? I've got a question from Councillor Crozier.
I had a case come up in the summer which somebody else reported, and it's all been sorted within 6 months. I think it's a record. Long may it continue.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
One of the the things that definitely has helped is the enforcement review meetings. I note the paper says there have been a dozen of them and they will continue. I wonder if they could be diarised, to use that horrid word, put in some sort of programme so we know when they're going to be. And we know that ours are included in some sort of list. At the moment, I have absolutely no idea whether one's planned for my ward or when it might be.
That's fine. I can certainly ask Helen to send something around to members.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Any other questions, members? In which case, Councillor Mott, if I could ask you to move the recommendations.
So, two recommendation members on page 11 on the paper copies, 13 of the Mod Gov, and I would like to move those recommendations, please.
Thank you. Could we have a seconder? Councillor Edmonds, thank you. Members, any debate? In which case, members, I'd like to add my congratulations to those of Councillor Crozier and everybody else. I've certainly had some contact with the enforcement team recently and very efficient in getting rid of some long-standing items from the list. So congratulations to them, and long may that continue. My thanks for them getting to grips with it. It's very impressive. Okay, we'll move to a vote then, members. All those in favour of the recommendations?
That's 8 and unanimous. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, members. We'll move on to item number 8, which is Month 7 Revenue Budget Monitoring Report. And if I could call on Councillor Edmonds to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. The report enables members to monitor income and expenditure variations against the approved budget for 2021-22 and provides a forecast for the year-end position. The report covers the first 7 months of the year to the end of October and is showing a projected year-end deficit of £33,000. The budget forecast table on pages 18 and 19 of your agenda papers clearly sets out the variations with explanatory notes for each item, but we will happily provide additional information if required by members. At the Hub Committee meeting in September of this year, it was recommended to transfer £190,000 from the COVID-19 losses earmark reserve to fund COVID-19 expenditure and the projected net losses on car parking income in the current year budget. An updated schedule of reserves is attached to Appendix A, showing a temporary increase of £2.61 million in earmark reserves, as explained in paragraph 4.3. This is a temporary increase. Unearmarked reserves stand at £1.294 million. You will note the report on leisure will be considered by the Hub Committee at the 1st of February 2022 meeting. Salary costs are predicted to be on target after applying a contribution of £80,000 from the Salary Savings Earmark Reserve. These monies were set aside in 2020-21 to recognise the salary pressures that would arise in this year's budget following the impact of the pandemic. An update of the savings and additional income that were identified in the 2021-22 budget setting process is set out in Appendix B, and I think that's fairly self-explanatory. So finally, Chair, the report recommendations are that the Hub Committee resolves to note the forecast income and expenditure variations and the overall projected deficit of £33,000, and to recommend to Council to apply up to £80,000 from the Salary Savings Earmark Reserve to support additional salary costs in 21-22. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. Members, any questions? Councillor Crozier.
Thank you, Leader. We haven't had any salary increases this year, I presume, because I understand has there been an agreement with the bodies that negotiate the wages. Thank you.
Mr. Bates, would you like to comment?
Thank you, I will. I'll bring Mrs. Buckle in if I get this wrong, but I think the answer to the question is no, there hasn't been, because it's still in dispute at this point. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you.
That leads me on to the question, if I may.
You may.
Has there been money set aside for any salary increase?
Mr. Bates.
There has, and I think that we've increased the provision in the budget for next year, have we not, Mrs. Buckle?
Yes, that's correct. For you, Leader, we've included provision of 2% per annum in our medium-term financial strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope that answers the question, Councillor Crozier. Any other questions, members? So thank you again to the accounts team for what is obviously a very comprehensive report, which hasn't led to many questions, but Councillor Edmonds, if you would like to therefore move the recommendations.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I moved the two recommendations, and those can be found on page 17 of your agenda papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. Members, any debate? Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say thank you so much to our finance team for keeping the council on track during a very difficult year that we've just had, and I think congratulations are in order. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel. Certainly been a very testing couple of years in many ways, and yes, I mean, I think the work that everybody has put in this year and in previous years has stood us in good stead, so thanks to everybody. Any other debate, members? In which case we'll move to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendations?
That's 8 and unanimous. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. If we can move then to item 9, which is capital budget monitoring, and if that could also be introduced by Councillor Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. Quarterly monitoring of the capital programme ensures the Council has arrangements in place to secure economy, efficiency and effectiveness in its use of resources, and enables members to identify any cost overruns at an early stage. This report confirms that at the 31st of October, all capital projects were within the individual capital budgets approved by members. Section 3 of the report provides an update on each of the capital projects. And again, I think that's self-explanatory. Further information on capital projects is provided in Appendix B, which is a restricted document. A summary of the capital programme is set out in Appendix A. Again, an exempt item, which profiles the capital budget over the current year and the following 2 years in line with the plan for West Devon. You will have noted the underspend against this year's budget. So finally, Chair, the report recommendation is that the Hub Committee resolves to endorse the contents of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Councillor Cheadle.
Yes, I'd like to ask Councillor Edmonds a bit of a tricky question, if I might. I've been a councillor for 7 years, and one of the first things I met when I joined the council was the saga of the Oakhampton movable floor. I note it's still a subject in our council papers, although it looks like it might have been solved. So could you hazard a guess when the Oakhampton movable floor budget item might be removed from our budget?
Tempted to say that's a movable feast, but perhaps I should say good news that things have moved forward. But I think and up and down. So, but I think Mrs. Buckle is, as normal, is being prudent, and for the time being, I think intends to keep this in the budget. But I think it's probably too early to remove it. I think we'll just give it a bit of time. But that, I'm sure, will be reviewed on a regular basis. And when we are happy that things are still moving in the right direction, it will be removed.
Thank you. I hope that answers the question.
Well, unless Mrs. Buckle wishes to add to that.
Mrs. Buckle?
Thank you, Leader. The movable floor has had problems in the past. It is working well at the moment. We feel we would recommend to members to retain that budget provision of 50,000 as a partnership contribution if a future engineering solution is required sometime down the line. I mean, members will remember that the movable floor was a Sport England criteria for the grant funding for building the Oakhampton Leisure Centre. And as I say, in its early years, there were some problems with the movable floor, but it is working satisfactorily at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. As ever, prudence prevails, and I'm very much in favour of that. Any other questions, members? I have one question, which is that I note that a little over £2 million was profiled in this year's budget to be spent in the capital programme, and to date we've spent 622,000. Is there any particular reason, without going into part two, why we haven't spent more of the allocation, and is that anything that we might be concerned about?
I think that is down to the disabled facilities grants, which were very slow to start applications during the pandemic, but I think they are now increasing, and I'm sure as they are processed, then that budget will be allocated. I think that is the main reason, but again, I'll defer to Mrs. Buckle. She may have further information on that point.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Councillor Edmonds. It is to do with the private sector renewal grants, the disabled facilities grants. It's also to do with the Green Homes grant as well, which was government funding, which we received for those grants. There have been issues with the supplier chain for that, which is set out, I think, on page 37 of the agenda. I mean, those installations will do things like reduce fuel poverty, reduce carbon emissions, but at the moment we don't have a supply chain for that. So I don't know if we've got Mr. Powell in the room, but he may be able to add some further detail to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Powell.
Thank you, Leader. Fresh off the press update on this. We have had problems with the supply chain with the original partner, but we've now got 9 installers on board. We've got a large number of residents who are applying. We've got some quotes coming through, so we expect to see some spend on that budget coming forward over the next couple of months.
Thank you. That's good news, and a good news story which will help both with our green agenda and with fuel poverty. So all in favour of that. Thank you. Any other questions, members? Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Leader. It's just following on from your question. I assume Mr. Powell will be able to answer this. That there's a deadline of usage of this capital money, or can it overlap into the new financial year?
Thank you. Good question, Mr. Powell.
Yeah, when the money was originally received, there were some deadlines, but the government, I think, realised that actually the deadlines were unrealistic. The main national scheme around Green Homes grants was completely cancelled, the voucher scheme that was used, because of the situation, there was no supply chain. We've had some negotiations with BEIS where we received the money from, and we've secured that money indefinitely to enable us to deliver the positive outcomes. So really good position for us. We got money in early by having a partner in place. That partner failed to deliver, unfortunately, but we've had those negotiations, and now with no time limits on the funding as it stands.
Thank you. Good question and helpful response. Thank you. Any other questions, members? Councillor Mott.
Sorry, I'm going to stick with the Green Homes grant. It says in there that the installations will reduce fuel poverty. How do we actually know that it will reduce fuel poverty? bearing in mind that electricity prices are going through the roof and these pumps are heavily reliant on electricity to run them.
Thank you. I don't know if Mr. Powell, you're able to comment on that as a technical expert. I'd imagine some of the work is also about insulation and reducing fuel spend as well, but perhaps you'd like to comment.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the original bid was for air source heat pumps and for external cladding. And that was the sort of the fabric first approach of making sure buildings are insulated to reduce energy costs. It's a very good point. Electricity costs are going through the roof, and therefore the fuel poverty line will move as a result of that, bringing more people into fuel poverty. Whatever we can do to actually improve the fabric of the building or provide a more efficient energy source of heating will help in terms of the cost of that individual family. But the statement, "will reduce fuel poverty," is a relative one to the situation in terms of how many people are in fuel poverty, and that moves. What we are doing now with the new scheme is widening out, not just to those two particular measures, but to a wider suite of measures that can improve properties. So that could include insulation, cavity, loft, and so on. So the scheme will be more accessible, and I think we'll be able to deliver the money to the right places more speedily as well.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Does that help, Councillor Mott? Thank you. Any other questions, members? In which case, could I ask Councillor Edmonds to move the recommendation?
Yes, certainly, Chair. I'll move the recommendation, which is on page 33 of your agenda papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Cheadle. Members, any debate? Nothing coming forward, in which case we'll move...
Sorry, Leader, before we do, Councillor Pearce is wishing to ask a question. I don't think we have the capability for him to ask. I'm asking him to type it, and I'll read it on his behalf. So if you just give me a millisecond, please, for Councillor Pearce to type the question in. Councillor Pearce has left it for later in the meeting. Thank you, Leader.
Okay. So, I'm trying to remember where we were now. I think we were just going to a vote. So, all those in favour of the recommendation?
That's unanimous, the recommendation. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, members. Okay, we'll move on to item 10 in that case, the draft revenue and capital budget proposals 2022 to 2023. So, members, in front of you are the proposals for the revenue and capital budget for 2022-2023 through to 2024-25. These papers have been produced following a member workshop on the 16th of November. The proposals set out our three-year medium-term financial strategy. Every member of the council, I'm sure, knows the history of this and will be